I'm an alcoholic. My name's Maryland or Mary.
Mary.
I like to make jokes that's my treated. What is that? Grave mental and emotional disorders. But mine's treated. So I have two names. And I want to thank this group. I want to thank Austria especially and all of you tonight for being here. And thank you, Shannon, for being willing to be the suspect. So, we're up here to tell our experience, strength, and hope, right? What it was like, what happened, and what we're like now. Yesterday was my sobriety anniversary. It's June 17th of 1988. And my home group is Seeking Serenity in Tacoma, Washington, part of District 45. I also have the extreme pleasure and honor of serving as your area archivist. So this history that you have that's laminated on your tables, I'm extremely familiar with, and I love it. I'm probably a storyteller, as most of us are, right? We are our stories here in Alcoholics Anonymous. So what it was like, and I don't know what I'm going to share tonight. This is what my husband taught me. By the way, my husband's in the program too. He's like 46 years sober. I don't know how he did it at 21, but he always said when I was young in the program that there's the story you think you'll tell, there's the story you tell, and then there's the story you wish you would have told. So, yeah, then there's the story, if you've heard me before, the story you wish I would have shared. So I'm born in a small town in Montana to a large family. There were 4 daughters before me, and alcohol wasn't present in that family in my perspective. Mental illness was. At the age of 6, my father was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic just after a trip where he kidnapped us and took us on a crazy trip. And so absurdity, eccentricity, craziness was a companion of mine at a very early age. My reaction to that was to disappear. And then at age, my mother becomes a single parent. She's got 7 children. We're raised on welfare, and it's not fun to be on welfare in a very small town in America. Probably not fun to be on welfare anywhere in the world, but it was really hard in that very small town. Taunting and bullying is not what happened to me. Just about everything but murder happened to me in that little town and my sisters. So I'll tell you, when I found alcohol at 13, now at 9 I tried it, I spit it out. Twice. It tasted icky. 13, I drank 1 Budweiser and I drank 6 Budweisers right after the other. So from the time at 13, for some reason, there was a click in me for booze. I hear a lot of people say because it took away the pain. I didn't think in the words of pain. I didn't think about resentments. When I got here, I didn't think I had any resentments. I'll tell you, at 25 years sober, I found out, I remembered that every meeting when they'd say, is there anyone with a topic? And in 1988, I thought you were talking just to me. And every time I shared my topic, I now realize at 25, I'm like, holy shit. Whenever I did, they shared on resentments and relationships. They never said, Mary, read that resentment prayer in the big book, right? But they shared on resentment. So anyway, I came in not knowing things like that. I am socially deficient. But how did I get here? I did start drinking at 13. I was kicked out of high school. I had they didn't push me into the legal system. We had things like, we know you're stealing, but if you stop, we won't have you arrested. Okay, and I did drunk driving, but they gave me a ticket for driving without my glasses instead of. So there were a lot of enablers in my little town, weren't there? So anyway, I drank in high school, all throughout high school. One of our funniest escapades where we used to there's another family of 7 kids whose parent wasn't in the home either because of their job. We'd sit in their house, in the Early's house, and we would put 99 bottles of beer on the wall in a pyramid. And one Monday, we decided that we were tired of the 99 bottles of beer and the 13 or 25 fifths of whiskey and wine that were empty. So we drove down a country road, all of us. There were several of us in the back with these empty bottles. Of course, wild ones and wild drivers in the front. And we're throwing bottles out this country road. Well, come to find out, the sheriff's brother was following us that day. So the next day, we were back out there picking up 99 bottles of beer on the wall. So I drank through college. I'm, by the way, that hiding as a child, I hid in words. I'm still a word. That's where I hide is words. And in school, I hid in words, and I got really good grades, and I was very lucky. So I got really good grades in high school. I got a free ride to college. I did very good in college. I did not go to my classes. I met my professors in the student union building at 11 o'clock because when you drink every night until 2 or 3 in the morning, it's not easy to get up at 8 o'clock for those classes. So luckily, my professors understood that, and they still passed me, even though I only met them at 11 to find out what really happened in the class that morning. So there were a lot of dysfunctional people in my college, evidently, too. So I did get good grades in college. I was a good student. Now, something happened, something very pivotal happened in my life in December of 80. There was a line I crossed morally. I'm not going to bring it up here, but I crossed a line and I knew I'd crossed a line. And I called my mother and talked to her a long time about it. But I decided to go forward with crossing this line. And 2 weeks later, my brother, just younger than me, and by the way, I was the fifth daughter. He was the first son. It was like Jesus, the second coming in my family. Paul was like the everything child. And I was the child that shouldn't have come. But anyway, so this hero child dies on January 6th of 1980. I'll tell you, I mean, I didn't know this in 1980. I knew it by the time I did my first step in 1988. I picked up a beer on January 6th, 1980, and I drank blackout or passed out every night until August 4th of 1982. And I now know today that's grief. I mean, I now understand that I drank to stop feeling, but when I started, that wasn't the point. On August 4th, 1982, I was facing a moral dilemma, the same moral dilemma that was facing me in 1979. And I committed the same act. And I said to the God inside me, I won't do that again. If it comes up again, I'm not doing this behavior again. And my next thought was, if you drink, you're going to do it again. So I knew that day booze was my issue. Now I tried reading all the positive mental attitude books, all of them. I'm one of those that read a book and didn't read a book. And then what I would do is I went to the bar on my nights off or any night of the week. And especially on my day off, though, I would give you a lecture on the latest book that will save your life. I changed them all the damn time. I don't know how they didn't tell me to shut up. But they were dysfunctional. They came back for the story. Anyway, I'm trying to read these books and trying to start thinking different. But, you know, the booze isn't stopping, right? So things aren't really changing, right? Because alcohol is a depressant. So even though I'm thinking positive mental attitude and Dale Carnegie and how to win friends and influence people and Og Mandino and all sorts of writers, yeah, I'm dating myself, Leo Vescaglia, all of that. I wasn't getting any different because the booze was still there. I started trying to control my drinking. I wasn't going to drink on holidays. 1985, I get a book in 84. And I read books all the time. I would get 9 or 11 of them in the winter in this small town because it was icy highways and you couldn't shop out of town all winter long in Montana. And there was this, I usually would get 13 books. And this one day in October of 1984, I saw a little book. It was yellow. It had really tiny, tiny writing on it. And I looked at it and it said, if you read this book and do what it says, your life will change forever. I'm like, oh, F that. In that moment, I put away all those 13 books that were in my arms. And I took home only that, I called it Baby Shit Yellow Book. That book had a kind of prayer in it about alcoholism. And it took me 4 months to read that book. I would read a paragraph and get scared the hell out of just because of what it would say. Finally read it on February 4th. I finished it. On February 5th of 1985, I was in my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. There were 3 people in that meeting. They were my brother's best friends, my younger brother. I had 2 brothers, one deceased and one younger, even than 4 years younger. His best friends were all in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's because everyone in my family, alcoholism doesn't run in my family, it gallops. So they're sober and they're talking drunkalog AA because they don't have any of you. None of the people that had gotten sober with Alcoholics Anonymous in my small town went to AA. So you had a 17-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 21-year-old who have never heard a person with experience in AA doing the meetings. But when that night on February 5th, I knew I was home. I knew this is where I belonged. I went back every week after bowling. And I didn't drink at bowling, which drinking at bowling was the reason I joined bowling, was to drink at bowling. We were very proud that we were the worst team in Broadus, Montana. It was really dysfunctional. Anyway, so I go every week for 4 weeks. My life has changed. I read that big book because they talk about that book. I read that book. I work those steps by myself because I'm not asking no 17-year-old punk chick what to do. But in my fourth meeting, 17-year-old punk chick, this is really why she's a punk chick now. She talks about cutting her hair and not cutting her hair and cutting her hair and cutting her hair. That was 45 minutes. And I left that meeting and I said, they don't want what I have. And I didn't go back. But you know, 5 years ago, when I went back to my little hometown, one of those people is still sober. So you see, the person who used within 3 months of that, Mary, because I faced a situation I didn't know how to do sober. So not knowing how to do sober. Now, the one claim to fame I have is I was a real I'm actually, my drug of choice is marijuana. But did you know you can't join the United States Army in 1986 if you come up hot on a piss test? So I am a woman who knows how to use her defects of character for her own benefit. So if it means I have to forego marijuana so that I have an income, travel, insurance, all those things the Army promised I was going to be what I could be, I could do that. So I haven't used marijuana since 1985. But in May of 85 is when I picked back up alcohol. Now I had periods. I'm not a drinker who can say I never drank one. And regretfully, because I have had moments where I only drank one, I'm one of those that can romance the drink. There was that one time I was going to mow my lawn and I only had one beer and I mowed the lawn. There's 47 times I didn't mow the lawn. I didn't do the dishes. I didn't do the laundry. My mother had to do my house and my laundry back in the 80s in Broadus, Montana. So anyway, I have some periods of not drinking between 85 and 88. But I have this habit. Remember, I have this moral line I like to cross. Well, I say I don't like to cross it, but alcohol leads me to crossing it, and then I accept it, and then I do things. So I cross it again. But I promised in 84 I won't do it again. So I don't do it again. I become a single mother. And I know after February 26th of 1988, after my son is born, say to God, I can't raise this child like this, like who I am. It won't work. And then I read a book. And it said, if you're in love with an alcoholic, go to Al-Anon. And I'm like, oh, right. Not working on me, right? That I got to go to Al-Anon. And as soon as I had that thought, a moment of clarity happened. And I heard, you are the alcoholic. And I called the U.S. Army. And they had me take a bunch of tests. And like the good student I am, I got 6 out of 6 and 8 out of 10 and 10 out of 10. And I qualified for inpatient treatment. So I flew away to treatment on, it's like June 30th. And I go to my first AA meeting back on July 1st on a Friday night. And I'll tell you what, I'm all indignant. I'm a 30-year-old soldier. I'm all that, right? Because it is all about me and a bag of chips, right? And why am I having to go to AA? Because I already did AA and it doesn't work. And then I sat down amongst people like you with the look in your eyes that you've got today. And I saw love and I saw hope. And I heard it was the first drink that got me drunk. And I'm telling you, I think I was 30 that year, and that was like mind blowing. It was like little explosions. The first drink, I'd been trying to manage cases of beer, whether I should drink Crackling Rosé or Tanqueray Gin. It was all, I thought it was about the substance. And they're like, it's the first drink. Wow, that's cosmic. Okay. But the rest of my life, I mean, I got to drink at my wedding. I'll have to drink at my children's wedding. What are we going to do about the future? And they were really good. They know us drunks are rebels. So they said, do you think you could do it for today? Well, shit, yeah, I can do anything. And then I'd lock myself into permanent sobriety. If you can do this one day at a time, guess what? You can't possibly get drunk again. So anyway, they tricked me. I got my first sponsor at treatment. She was in my home. She actually spoke. I'm one of those that thinks you're a burning bush. No matter what I do, I believe God is speaking to me. Treated mental illness. But anyway, at our ceremony to depart the treatment center, the woman who spoke was from my Army post back in Arizona. My God, she's supposed to be my sponsor. I didn't ask her if she worked the program. She never did ask me to work the program. She never brought up the big book. She never nothing. Now, the truth was, and we didn't meet on a regular basis in her home or anything, but we were in the same home group that met twice a day. We were in a home group that had big book studies every week, a 12 and 12 study every week. So I went through that big book 2.5 times before I left there for an assignment in Germany with my husband. But anyway, Naomi did do one thing. She knew how to live sober as a single parent in the throes of an Army career with a weird schedule. Because self-pity is my bag. I've written a poem about it being all sequins and stuff. But if you really get into the bag of self-pity, you'll get stuck with all the needles and stuff. But seriously, self-pity is my bag. And so having a job with my job in the Army, it was go to work at 3 one morning, get off at 2 in the afternoon, not go till the next morning at 10 in the morning, work till 8 at night, then go back in at 3 in the morning. And I could feel sorry for myself in between those two shifts. Pour me a beer. Okay, so I'm sober. I'm in the home group. I do my steps. And everything I share that first year is about resentments or relationships. And I didn't think of you guys as relationships. I didn't think of God as relationships. I wanted a relationship. So they suggested you wait. Where are we? Almost. Okay, this has got to be it. Because I am sober. At least I didn't know how long I'd stay drunk tonight. But, all right, 10 minutes. Okay, I'll talk faster and you have to listen faster. Okay, so I'm a year sober. They bring me out of the field to go get my 1-year chip. So we're in the truck in a deuce and a half going back out, and I've got my 1 chip. And I'm like looking up in the sky, talking to that God inside me. Okay, where's that relationship? The soldier sitting right here in that deuce and a half said, Mary, you want a bird? I said, oh God, not that kind of relationship. So I got the bird though. It was a cockatiel. A week later though, I'm opening an AA meeting in my home group on Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And I'm running late. So back then we had to set all this up. You had to dig it out of the closet, go put it all around. And I'm furiously getting out all this stuff. And I hear, do you need any help? And startled, I swung around and I saw these eyes and I said, oh God, can this one be single? I don't know if you've noticed what we can look like when we come into the rooms. We can be pretty shaky looking. We might look shaky after a while in the rooms too, but I mean, seriously shaky in that first year. That poor man shared he was getting single. He didn't know, but I used the 3rd step prayer every day. I learned that like the first night in my first home group. Do that 3rd step. At the end of my 3rd step the next morning, I added a line. It said, if that man needs a relationship, I volunteer. That poor man didn't know what I was doing. But 9 months later, he put a ring on my finger. And that poor man still is married to me. He's down in Tacoma. Okay, so I don't have much time. Time is up. 10 minutes. Okay. So I'll tell you, what is it like now? Carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, no matter what I do, no matter where I am, is probably the greatest service. You know, when I came here, alcoholism, not wasm, of course, but ism stood for I, self, and me. Today it means I serve mankind. There were times in my sobriety, I'm telling you, from 2002 to 2011, my post-traumatic stress disorder, which was re-triggered in the U.S. Army. My father is actually where it stems from because of some weird eccentric behaviors, triggered in the U.S. Army. But for 9 years, I couldn't darken the doors of any group environment, including an AA meeting. I couldn't go to a church in Denver. I couldn't go to lunch with you. I could still work. We don't know how that worked, but anyway. Took me 9 years, and I was finally on the brink of an edge. I got into a jumping off place. I got into a meeting at Meeker. I don't know if you've heard of Meeker in Tacoma. It's kind of got a little reputation. But the reason I selected it, we had 42 meetings a week. There was no way I could have an excuse because there wasn't a meeting today when I drove by, because there was a meeting. But it served its purpose. And now I'm in a group called Seeking Serenity. But I did get back into AA slowly and into service. Those first 2 decades, my husband and I, because he was 40 years sober before we entered this kind of service of general service at the group and district and area. We served mankind by raising 3 children, his, mine, and ours family. We were both Army soldiers. He's got 27 years. I've got 20. I'm a retiree. We've been in PTAs and all sorts of stuff. So serving is probably the greatest gift I've got. I love telling stories. So if you ever want to see the repository, Mikey's been there. He's volunteered with me and helped sort newsletters with me. So anyway, I really want to thank you, Austria, for inviting me to speak. And I can go on. I'm the dangerous kind that could speak forever about Alcoholics Anonymous and what it's done for me. Like most of us, it saved our lives and transformed us into lives of usefulness. So with that, I stayed drunk too long. I'm sorry. Can I share one last thing? Okay, I lied. Okay, most of us know the story of Bill, right? Jung to Roland to Ebby to Bill. I don't know if any of you have heard the story that was happening in Akron, Ohio. A couple of years before Bill and Bob meet in Akron, Ohio, a particular rubber manufacturer gets the Oxford Group to come to Akron, and the Oxford Group, Henrietta Seiberling has liked them, and they get Bob and Annie start going because they think that'll help him, and he's trying to change his drinking. And of course, but he's not telling anyone. And he, of course, is like most of us, doesn't think anyone else knows about his drinking. But they do. This is a little publication, and I just got it back in Akron again. And it says, this is what Henrietta did. I warned Ann that I was going to have this meeting. They're going to have it on Wednesday night. They're going to get real, and see if Bob will get real in the Oxford Group. Henrietta says, I didn't tell her it was for Bob, but I said, come prepared to mean business. There is going to be no pussyfooting around. And we all shared very deeply our shortcomings and what we had victory over. And then there was silence, and I waited and thought, will Bob say anything? Sure enough, in that deep, serious tone of his, he said, well, you good people have all shared things I am sure were very costly to you. And I'm going to tell you something which may cost me my profession. I am a silent drinker and I can't stop. This was weeks before Bill came to Akron. So we said, do you want us to pray for you? And he said, yes. Then someone said, do you want us to go down on your knees and pray? And he said, yes. So we did. So the next morning, at this point, the Oxford Group has you listen in the morning for guidance. Henrietta receives what she feels is from the top of her head, guidance. Dr. Bob must never drink again. She calls him and says, I've got guidance. Bob runs over, waiting to hear the new management tool for booze consumption. And she tells him, and he's really disappointed. But then 2 weeks later, when Bill W. calls and talks with Henrietta that he's a rum hound from New York and needs to talk to one of us, she knew exactly who needed to hear him that night in May. And if you think about it, Bill went there to seal a rubber deal, right? If he got that company, none of us would be here tonight. None of us would have been rescued from jails, institutions, and death. So when you're looking at your greatest mistake, tomorrow when you think you effed up, remember, it could turn out to be the best blessing you've ever had in your life and for the lives of all around you. Thanks for letting me share and inviting me.